Hi everyone, my name is Sahil Agarwal, and on behalf of the entire team of PENdulum Global, I wanted to welcome you to our webinar training video on how to facilitate letter writing with your adolescent. So keep in mind, the entire concept behind our Pen Pal program is to have conversations with our adolescents. These adolescents who are made vulnerable by certain circumstances within their global communities, whether that's being stigmatized due to HIV and AIDS, to being impacted by some sort of armed conflict or other conflicts within the country. The idea behind this Pen Pal program is to engage these adolescents in meaningful conversations that can spark them towards bright futures. So while this video is short, it's probably one of the most important ones because it kind of forms the boundaries that we'll be following when we watch when we actually write these letters. So the idea, once again, is to help your adolescent really recognize his or her potential and to recognize that they have the ability to make those meaningful contributions to their communities despite these individual adolescent circumstances. So what I want to do is kind of provide you with a little bit of an overview of how the letter writing process works, and then I'll get into the nitty-gritty details about what kind of conversations you are going to have with your adolescent. So in terms of the letter writing process, you can see from this diagram, and this diagram is also on our website, is that we're following a sort of checkpoint system, and that's indicated by the two green circles. So once everyone has written their letters in the United States and they're ready to be shipped off to our global communities to disperse to our adolescents, we actually collect all of the letters in a central location in the United States. So typically, and we'll work with you to find out which way is best for you, but typically you will be scanning in and sending your letters over email to our email account, and then we will collect your letter and we will audit it. What it means is that we are going to make sure that all of the conversations are both appropriate and meaningful, and this is just a way for us to do a sort of quality control before we send out our letters to our adolescents. So once that first checkpoint is crossed, we will send the letters to the global communities to your specific adolescent, and your adolescent will have time to read the letter and write back to you. And once they send that letter back, once again, we will receive all the letters at a central location, and then we will actually ship them to you electronically over email so that you can have access to those letters. And then, of course, respond and go through the same cycle again. Now, for the second checkpoint, we will not be auditing the letters. So we want to make sure that our adolescents maintain a sense of privacy and really maintain that sense of trust that they can have with you, that you are the only ones who are having that conversation with them. So we don't want to interfere and read those letters. But like I said, we will be reading the letters that you send out to make sure, once again, that the content is both meaningful and appropriate for our Pen Pal program. So now that I've gone over the basics of how logistically the letters will be sent, I want to go over a few key points about youth mentoring and about how these letters should be written. I'll get into this in the next few slides. You know, these 6 guidelines, they're guidelines. You got to follow them. There's really not much leeway in terms of, you know, what you can do and what you cannot do. When we get into the next slides, though, you'll find that these conversations, while we're trying to follow some overall themes, we're not actually trying to make you follow some sort of rigid style of letter writing, but I'll get into that in a moment. So let's go over the must-haves, what you got to do. The first thing is, and I think one of the most important things, is to keep the child first. Keep your adolescent first. What I mean by that is you do not want to have direct conversations that are going to really directly address the issues that the adolescents are facing in their countries. So for example, if you are working with an adolescent who has been impacted by HIV or AIDS, the idea is to not keep the focus on the fact that they may be HIV positive or they've been impacted some way by HIV and AIDS. The idea behind your conversations is to address, well, how can your adolescent grow from here? So your conversations should not consist of discussions that talk about HIV and AIDS in the specific example that I'm giving you, but discussions that can help your adolescent progress forward. So we're really keeping the child first, not their condition, not their circumstance, and really making sure that these conversations are supposed to build your adolescent towards a strong future, not really to engage in discussions that that are going to bring out the past, that are going to bring out, going back to the same example, their HIV positive status. These things are kind of put on the back burner. The reason why these adolescents have been selected is because they're vulnerable in some sense, and so we know that from our side, and our goal first and foremost is to empower these adolescents. But at the same time, going to number 2, not all of the conversations need to be deep or profound. A lot of times these adolescents just need someone to talk with, somebody to kind of hang out with, somebody to just have normal conversations with. So while we're trying to hopefully have you engage in meaningful discussions with your adolescent, at the same time, these conversations should not be rigid. They don't all have to be deep or profound. They can be fun and exciting and contain just having fun with your adolescent through these conversations. And so kind of going in line with that, this isn't an interview. It's a conversation. So you're not just throwing questions at your adolescent, and then your adolescent will respond to them, and then you will send more questions. That's not really the way that we want this to work. This needs to be kind of like a feeding off of one another, where you're engaging in conversations, you're talking, you're sharing your own stories, you're hearing out your adolescent's stories, and you're responding to those stories. It's not just a question answer session. It's a real conversation. It's you're making a friend with an adolescent in another country. You're acting as a mentor to another adolescent in another country. So really keep that in mind, that you're really just trying to have a conversation that consists of both meaningful and just fun conversations. Just a logistical thing, try to use pens. Actually, don't try to, this is a requirement. Use pens for this letter writing, and avoid using too much color when possible. The reason why I say use pens is because when we're scanning in our letters, if you use pencil, some things might not show up. So just make sure you use pen so that it's very clear. Reason why I say avoid color when possible is depending upon your global region, that area may or may not have access to a color printer in sites that we actually email our letters to. In sites that we ship the letters to won't be a problem, but for the most part, let's just try to avoid using too much color when possible. Try to stick with that black ink. Furthermore, kind of going off of that, 2 more important things is use simple language here. Unless we tell you otherwise, in most of these countries, English is being taught. However, these adolescents may or may not be entirely fluent in the language. So keep the conversations simple, keep the language simple. Don't use complex sentences, complex words that, as a college student or as a graduate student, you might have in your normal conversations, but conversations that, are quite simple and that you think a normal child would understand when you're having that conversation with them. And finally, please use legible handwriting. One thing that's going to be a really big barrier for us, if you're unable to really make sure that you maintain good handwriting, is being able to read your letters. So you want your adolescent to be able to read your letters. You want us to be able to read your letters when we're making sure that the content is appropriate. And I can assure you that if the letters are not written cleanly and they're not legible, then we will send them back to you and you will have to rewrite them. So save yourself the heartache and do it well the first time. Make sure that your handwriting is legible. So just some basic rules here. And so now I want to go into the meat of this. So what kinds of conversations do you want to have with your adolescent throughout this whole 9-month to 1 year pen pal program? And so I wanted to draw on this model. This model is really the basis of the rest of our conversation here. I got this from a fantastic paper that was really it's called "How Effective Are Mentoring Programs for Youth: A Systematic Assessment of the Evidence," and this was created by Mr. David L. Du Bois and his colleagues at the University of Illinois at Chicago, University of Massachusetts, and the University of Louisville in Kentucky. And I will be posting this paper below. It's a fantastic paper that goes into really the theoretical constructs behind youth mentorships and what are some of the aspects that these programs focus upon. And so this is really a good figure from that paper that discusses that. And it talks about this idea that if you have a mentorship program in which an adolescent and the mentor have a very strong relationship that consists of this trust, empathy, and mutuality, then this mentorship will result in 3 major areas of development for that adolescent. First is social and emotional development. The second is cognitive development, and the final is identity development. And I'll get into all of these as we talk through each of these for each of our conversations. But the idea is all of these 3 aspects are going to feed into positive future outcomes for the adolescents. But of course, there are some sort of moderators to that. You can see that are on the bottom of this figure. There are some areas that may or may not really be truly addressed in our program, but really I guess the most important aspect for us is that mentoring relationship. The strength of the mentoring relationship is going to affect how these adolescents are going to develop in each of these 3 areas. And so it's really important, just keep in mind as we talk about each of these 3 aspects and conversations that are going to help our adolescents develop in each of these 3 aspects. Just keep in mind, just think about this model again and see where we're going here when we talk about these 3 aspects and the effects that these aspects can have. And so, like I said, fantastic paper. I'm going to post it underneath the video if you're on our website, pendulumglobal.org, in the education tab. Fantastic paper. If you get a chance to read through it, I think it's a very meaningful piece of work for you to take a look at if you get a chance. And so now I kind of wanted to talk about our topics of discussion. So what kinds of conversations are we going to be having with our adolescents? Once again, and I brought this up earlier, is we don't want to maintain a sense of rigidity. So while I'm giving you basically about 4 different conversation topics that are going to once again feed back into that model, at the same time I want you to keep in mind that I don't want you to maintain a sense of rigidity. In the sense that when you're writing these letters, it's okay to go off topic. It's okay to bring up other aspects that follow up what your adolescent has said in a previous letter. So it's a very fluid process, but I'm bringing up these points of discussion because these are what we believe are going to be critical for you to at least include, for you to at least think about when you're writing your letters, so that your adolescent can really follow this model that we're following to have the most positive outcomes, right? Because that's really the ultimate goal of our program here. So, of course, the first one, I guess this is what everyone kind of needs to start with. So in a sense, this is going to be somewhat rigid, is an introduction. So your first letter that you're going to send out is going to be an introductory letter. You're going to introduce yourself. You're going to share a little bit about your background, your family, your school, and you're going to ask your mentee about his or her background, your adolescent. What kind of background does he or she come from? And ask questions that are going to help you learn more about your adolescent. What kind of questions do you want to ask your adolescent to learn a little bit more about them? And let your mentee know that you're a friend and that he or she can trust you with his or her feelings. So keep in mind, once again, we, as in PENdulum Global, myself and the rest of my team, we are not going to be reading these letters that your adolescents send to you. The only letters that we are going to read are the ones you send out, just to make sure that you are maintaining the standards that we've been talking about and that we're going to continue to talk about here. But it's really important, once again going back to that figure, that you maintain and you establish a very strong relationship with your pen pal, because that is what is going to allow for meaningful discussions to occur. So this is just, once again, introduction letters. You're going to send a letter out. You're going to receive a letter. Keep that conversation going. Learn about your adolescent, and keep the conversations going from there. And so once again, just to keep in mind here, these, I'm going to be talking really about 5 core aspects, 5 core conversations that you're going to have with your adolescents over a period of 9 to 12 months. So we're not talking about 1 letter per discussion point, because that would be done in a few weeks. But the idea is for you to have these ongoing conversations that kind of fold in each of these different conversation topics. And so once again, I'm bringing up these 5 discussion points, but at the same time, you have so much time to go through them, and you can revisit certain topics again and again. So don't stress too much about following this rigid guideline here. But of course, everyone's going to be doing an introduction letter in the beginning. All right, so our next point of discussion is that social and emotional development. So this is really your first aspect that I'm bringing up. Doesn't have to be the first one you talk about. Just one of the discussion points that we'd like you to bring up. And so once again, going back to that paper and that model that we discussed earlier, the idea behind social and emotional development of your adolescent is to learn about how does the adolescent perceive himself or herself, about the community, about his or her family, about his or her friends. So the idea is to gain a little bit of an understanding of the support systems that this adolescent has in his or her life. And hopefully you can also become one of those support systems. And so I've listed some key points to kind of talk about in this social and emotional development discussion. The first is ask 3 things that your pen pal likes about himself or herself, 3 things that he or she dislikes, and you can provide, you can maybe strike that conversation by bringing up some things you like about yourself and some things you don't like about yourself, some things that you could improve upon in yourself. Ask 3 things that your pen pal likes about his or her family, likes and dislikes about the community. What kinds of activities does the adolescent participate in within his or her family, and how strong are those relationships? Is there a sibling that this adolescent really connects with, or a mother figure, a father figure? Or what kinds of relationships does this adolescent have? And then, of course, friends, the strength of those relationships with those friends. Learn a little bit about their friends and encourage your adolescents and let them know that you are also a friend for them. And so, engage in that conversation and provide some advice. while bringing up those positive aspects and really applauding that your pen pal has really cool aspects about himself or herself that he or she likes, you can address the things that he or she doesn't like, maybe ways to improve them, maybe ways that the adolescent can work on those aspects to start liking more things about himself or herself. So really fostering a social and emotional development. So the next discussion point is cognitive development. So the idea behind cognitive development is to learn about how the adolescent is doing in terms of a academic or an educational point of view. So you're going to be asking questions and having conversations about education. What kind of education is the adolescent having? What quote unquote grade are they in? What are they studying right now? What kind of relationship does your adolescent have with teachers? And what kind of access to resources does the adolescent have? And how is the adolescent as a student? Does the student actually, does the adolescent like going to school? Does he enjoy learning? So part of this is giving academic advice and sharing some of your own stories from school that are really going to highlight the importance of an education, an importance of understanding that learning is a fun process and that a lot can be gained in terms of a future from a strong educational foundation. So this is a very good discussion and a very important discussion to have with your adolescent. The next discussion point is identity development. So because this is a little bit more complicated to understand, I kind of provided a little bit of an idea of what that means. So the idea, once again from the paper behind identity development, is that your adolescent will attach himself or herself to someone who he or she identifies as a sort of role model. And that may very well become you at some point, as you would become one of their role models, because after months of discussion and months of giving advice and having these fun conversations with your adolescent, there's a lot to gain from the adolescent's perspective, so they may begin to see you as a role model. So questions to kind of ask about this identity development is, ask your pen pal to think about who does he or she look up within the community that he or she lives in. Anybody who your adolescent gains advice and support from. Also discuss these career aspirations and future goals, because that kind of feeds into identity development, this idea of how does your adolescent perceive himself or herself from a role standpoint. What role does your adolescent think that he or she is going to play in the future? And so once again, stressing that importance of an education and really working hard towards those goals and those dreams. And so really making sure you bring in those stories, you bring in those conversations that are going to really illustrate how your adolescent can develop that identity and really develop strong role models and career aspirations. And so the final discussion, and I've talked about this multiple times before, particularly in our first overview video, but the last discussion that you're going to really be having with your adolescent is that community service discussion, because as part of a sort of graduating aspect for these adolescents is, once they've completed the Pen Pal program, they're going to do some sort of service project within their communities to highlight their growth, to really show that they too can make some meaningful contribution to their communities. And so you will be playing an instrumental role in that, because near the end of your 9 to 12 month Pen Pal program with your adolescent, you will begin brainstorming community service projects. So you're going to ask your adolescent to identify things that he or she feels like are issues within his or her community, things that they'd like to take upon to maybe do some sort of service. and then work with your adolescent to brainstorm a concrete idea. So the conversation should be adolescent driven, but it should be helped by you. So you are going to help brainstorm some ideas and create ultimately a list of pretty solid ideas that are realistic for your adolescent to support. So keep in mind that as an organization, we have limited resources. We're going to have a lot of adolescents doing service projects. So each adolescent should be doing some sort of small service project within his or her community that we can support. So with that in mind, come up with some sort of realistic service projects that your adolescent can do. And then once you've actually brainstormed that list and you have a final list, you will send that list to us, and we'll go through that process with you in a more detailed training packet that all volunteers will receive. But the idea is, once you have your list, you will send them to us, and we will work with you to figure out which project the adolescent should undertake, and then we will all work together, and we will give the adolescent the resources and the support that is needed to make that community service project a reality. And as these and I guess it kind of sixth the discussion, but not really. It's kind of a follow-up as part of your letters, is you're going to find out how are those community service projects going. You're going to find out from your adolescent what's the progress on those activities. Are there any issues going on logistically? How has the adolescent grown from the experience? So make sure that you tie in that specific community service project to the amount of growth that the adolescent has experienced as a result of this youth mentorship program. And so I hope that this has provided you with some really good discussion points that are going to highlight once again that model, that idea that we can foster a cognitive, a social and emotional, and a identity development within the adolescent to help empower them towards bright futures. So once again, on behalf of the entire team of Pendulum Global, I wanted to thank you for watching this video on facilitating effective letter writing. Check out the rest of our videos on pendulumglobal.org. Visit us on Facebook. Our link is there as well. And if you have any questions, be sure to shoot us an email at volunteer@pendulumglobal.org. Thank you very much.